Yo, what's going on, y'all? It's Cone back here again today with another video, and today we're going to talk for a bit about James Harden and the Philadelphia 76ers. It's been a really boring offseason, I'm sure you know. In the past few years, we've gotten like superstar trades, blockbuster deals, big-time signings. None of that has really happened this summer. We, of course, got the Dame trade request, but there's nothing happening on that front, and I'm kind of just sick of the rumors at this point. Similar thing with James Harden, where he requested a trade because he wasn't getting that big-time contract like he thought he was going to get from the Sixers. So he said, okay, I'm going to opt in. I'm looking for you to trade me. And again, nothing has really happened on that front either. So the only two like big-time trade requests have had literally no movement whatsoever. There's not much going on. But yesterday, James Harden did something that certainly made headlines and finally got the NBA world talking again. Like I said, he requested a trade back at the start of free agency, but since then there hasn't been much movement. Right now, he's actually on a tour in China. I believe he's promoting his brand. He did a three-point contest with some fans. He recorded some TikTok dances. I thought I saw something like that on Twitter yesterday. He hosted a youth camp. But most notably, he made a comment that kind of has the NBA world in a frenzy. It's a video that, when I first woke up and saw it, I was stunned it was real. I double-checked, triple-checked that it wasn't like AI, that it was coming from the real Shams, and it was. But basically, in this video, James Harden, we knew that he wasn't on the best of terms with Morey, but he puts it all out there and says, actually, I hate this guy and I refuse to play with him. So I'll go ahead and just play you the video real quick.
Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of. Let me say that again. Daryl Morey is a liar, and I will never be a part of an organization that he's a part of again. Thank you, man. Any more questions? You good?
So yeah, to recap, he said that Daryl Morey is a liar. He will never play for an organization that Morey is associated with ever again. And not only did he say that, but he doubled down. He said, let me say it again, completely unprompted. It wasn't like someone's like, can you clarify? And he's like, yeah, let me repeat that. He just straight up said it, like twice, to everybody out there. Afterwards, he asked any questions, so it must have been prompted by some question. I haven't seen a video where we know exactly what prompted that response from him, but it seems like he really needed to get that off his chest. So we knew the relationship between Harden and Morey wasn't great because of the trade requests and because the fact that Harden didn't get that long-term contract like he thought he was going to get after last year's pay cut. But this shows that not only is it a good relationship, but it seems completely unsalvageable. It's also just wild to hear him say this like so blatantly. It's not like a subliminal shot where it's a bit of a gray area. He straight up says that he is a liar. He doesn't like him. He doesn't want to be anywhere near him. And he says it twice. This video is hilarious to me. I've watched it like 20, 30 times at this point. I'm just happy there's something to talk about, and it means a lot for the Sixers situation. This comes a few days after Woj told us that the Sixers have apparently stopped seeking a trade for Harden at the moment because they're unhappy with the offers out there. They didn't want to make a trade that they believed would compromise their title hopes, and they believe that they have a championship team still with him on the roster. Now, I don't blame them for not liking the offers out there, in particular the Clippers offer, which is the only one that we've really heard about. I don't blame them because it seems like the offer from the Clippers is just old role players and like maybe Terrence Mann, but they don't want to include him apparently. Maybe it's Amir Coffey, who's an interesting young player, but he's not like this high potential guy. I think he's already like 25, 26 years old. It's not a great package. Like, the Sixers are trying to compete for a championship. They have an MVP caliber player in Joel Embiid. Whatever return they get for Harden, it has to be perfect. They have to get this trade right, get the pieces that they need to help compete both now and maybe down the line, or get some expiring contracts to go into next offseason where they could have a max contract slot alongside Embiid, alongside Maxey. Maybe they bring back Tobias Harris on a smaller deal. They could build a really good team next offseason if they get this trade right. The Clippers offer to me does not seem like the right move, so I don't blame them at all for not liking that Clippers offer of aging role players that really would not help them compete for a championship, in my opinion. Actually, as I'm sitting here recording this, I just got another notification. This one's coming from Ramona Shelburne at ESPN. Somebody said to me yesterday, this is only the beginning. This is just the beginning of what James Harden is going to do to make life very uncomfortable for the Philadelphia 76ers going into training camp. So he's pretty much on a path of destruction. So we've reached this standoff between general manager Daryl Morey and James Harden, who have had a long-time relationship together that now is seemingly destroyed. they were together for a long time in Houston, and Morey was a big reason why Harden came to Philly from Brooklyn. Like in Houston, they built an incredible team. They had the second most wins out of any team in the NBA, only behind the Spurs, in Daryl Morey's tenure. He got James Harden, Chris Paul, he got him Russell Westbrook, brought in Dwight Howard, brought in these solid role players. They nearly took down the unstoppable Warriors together, and then he comes over to the Sixers, again, in large part due to Daryl Morey being there, also, of course, with Joel Embiid there. But Morey was a big factor in getting Harden to say that actually, Philly is where I want to be, not Brooklyn, towards the end of his Nets tenure. And now they've went from being connected for a while to being at odds in this really difficult spot. And now here we are where things are looking like a dumpster fire. And of course, people are taking their sides on this, saying that Morey's in the right, that Harden's in the right. I really don't know whose side I'm on at this point. It's a weird situation. We'll start with talking about what happened with Daryl Morey. So, seemingly, he had James Harden take a pay cut in order to help the Sixers improve last offseason, and now he's not giving Harden the money that Harden believes he's owed. I mean, maybe Harden could still get it after this season from Philly if he balls out and they go far, but he's not getting it right now. And of course, getting up there in age, he wants the guaranteed money in the moment, especially if the Sixers under the table promised him that, hey, you take this pay cut now, and next year, we'll go ahead and make sure that you get your bag. It sucks for James Harden, who is trying to continue to get big time contracts going into the twilight of his career, and he's not getting the money now. From a franchise perspective, I will say it does make sense. If you're the Sixers, I don't think Harden at this point in his career is worth like a 4-year max contract. He had some amazing moments, but there are also some really low lows, and there's clear signs of regression from the beard. Meanwhile, Harden is in another situation where he's forcing his way out of a city in spectacular fashion, and this is without even seeing what he's going to do next, which Ramona Shelburne is seemingly hinting at is going to be wild. He may be the greatest trade requester of all time. His bag is deep. We talk about going back to Houston the first time where he requested a trade. He skipped training camp to hit up Atlanta and Vegas, where I'm pretty sure he got photographed doing those things. I played a few games, and then after a blowout, he let loose at the post-game press conference saying Houston wasn't good enough, the situation was unfixable, and he was traded, I think, like a day or two later. In Brooklyn, he made it very well known that, hey, not only do I want to leave here, but I want to go to Philly in particular. And now, when he's trying to leave Philly, he's seemingly ready to make things incredibly uncomfortable and saying the only place I want to go is LA, similar to the way that he did with Philly when he was with the Nets. There's a lot of people talking about how Harden probably should have just left the Sixers instead of opting into his contract. And yeah, he could have done that, but one issue is there really weren't that many suitors out there for Harden in the first place. Houston was reportedly all season interested in taking James Harden away from the Sixers, bringing him back to the franchise that he played most of his career with. But as the offseason began, it became more and more clear that they really didn't want to go that route and instead opted for Fred VanVleet on a shorter term deal rather than giving Harden this big, like 4-year max or something similar. Meanwhile, with the Sixers, they also don't want to really give him that money. They said you can opt into your player option, but otherwise, maybe we'll give you a smaller term contract. Outside of those two teams, really not that many suitors that either have the cap space or are wanting to bring on James Harden because he just doesn't fit what they're trying to do there, and again, would probably demand a lot more money than they're willing to give him. You can decide for yourself who's in the right or the wrong, but the one thing that remains true is this is incredibly awkward. And it's just crazy to me how something like this is always happening with Philadelphia, whether it's on the court or off the court. Philly is usually at the epicenter of most of the NBA's drama. We talk about the on-the-court problems with them losing to the Raptors in the second round a few years ago with probably the best team they've ever had, or at least the best team they've had in this process era. I should make that more clear, because I know some of you are going to comment about those teams forever ago. The best team that they've had in the process, Joel Embiid era, but they lose to a ridiculous Kawhi fading into the corner buzzer beater that hits the rim like 37 times and drops in. Against the Hawks, they lose, being the number 1 overall seed in the Eastern Conference. They should have gotten that series. They should have won Game 7 at home, but instead collapsed. Ben Simmons passes the ball, being right under the rim, being guarded by Trae Young. They blew a 3-2 series lead against the Celtics in the second round this year. After battling, despite not having Joel Embiid to begin the series, they took that lead. Jason Tatum was bad in Game 6 all the way up until the end, and they still collapsed and couldn't get it done, and then got blown out in Game 7. You had the Hawks series, which led to the Ben Simmons situation, where he sat out of training camp. They brought him in, and he was sitting there in practice, phone in pocket, stuff I referenced earlier. He didn't end up playing, refused to. Morey held on to him for a while. Things got incredibly uncomfortable there too, but eventually they traded him, funnily enough, for James Harden, who has again made things incredibly uncomfortable. It is just nonstop drama with this franchise, and it might only be just beginning, both because of what James Harden could do in the coming months or so, but also because of what could happen with Joel Embiid as a result of everything going on. If the Sixers don't get the Harden trade right, and following the deal itself, aren't able to continuously give Embiid more talent, there's a chance that Embiid could be the next superstar to angle his way out of the franchise. He could say, I'm 30 years old at this point. I don't know how much longer I'm going to have at this MVP level. I want to go ahead and win a title. I'm sick of losing in the second round. And Philly just doesn't right now feel like the spot where I can do all of this. So trade me, or at the end of this contract, I'm just going to go ahead and walk. I think that's a real possibility sometime soon. Some people are also noting the fact that Embiid yesterday removed some Philly stuff from his bio. His location is no longer Philadelphia. There's nothing there. It doesn't say processing in his bio anymore like it used to, but I don't think that means much. Joel Embiid is a troll. He likes to do stuff like that to get a reaction out of people, so I'm not buying into that too much. But just from a basketball point of view, I could see Embiid being one of the next superstars to try and leave if the Sixers don't get this Harden thing right. This is one of the most important moments that the Sixers have had in really probably franchise history. But for now, it's going to be a waiting game. We'll see what happens when training camp actually starts to roll around. Harden could definitely sit out of it to make his point, and I'm interested to see what things he'll do to make things, quote, wildly uncomfortable. I don't even know what that entails, and I do expect it to get to that point where Harden has to decide, am I going to go to training camp or am I going to hold out for the moment? I mean, Daryl Morey held Ben Simmons in Philly all the way up until the deadline, not playing him the entire season, and I could see something very similar here. Morey really doesn't make deals unless he's getting the return that he's looking for. Now, I will say there's leverage on both sides. Harden has some of his own because Daryl Morey has to put a contender around Joel Embiid. And without Harden, they're not one. If they can find a good return for Harden at some point, they can become a contender, but is Embiid willing to wait to see what deal comes up? And what if nothing happens? What if all throughout the season up to the deadline, you don't get any better offers, and suddenly you've got to make a decision? Do you just go ahead and trade him for the offers that are out there, where you've probably lost some of your leverage at that point, or do you just possibly waste a year of Joel Embiid's prime not being one of the top contenders in the Eastern Conference, something that Embiid probably won't be too happy about and could end up forcing him out of the city. So Harden has leverage, but meanwhile, Daryl Morey has some of his own too, because according to the CBA, there is a clause that's built in to prevent players from holding out till the end of their contracts. Pretty much, if a guy doesn't play and refuses to show up the entire season like it sounds like Harden might, they're in violation of their contract, and they don't enter free agency unless the franchise that they're supposed to play for decides otherwise. So pretty much, Harden can't sit out the whole year, or the Sixers can just keep him there anyways. Plus, even if he does sit out the whole year and the Sixers say, okay, we'll still let you walk, that would be a terrible look. I mean, he burned his bridges in Philadelphia at this point, or if he goes down that route, he especially will. In Brooklyn, he demanded out after a year and a half. In Houston, he very well made it known that he wanted out of that franchise after playing there forever. Like, he has consistently requested trades. He's burned bridges. If he does it to an extreme extent like he might do in Philly here, that's a terrible look. He already didn't have that much free agency interest. If he does, that shows that, hey, at any moment I could request a trade or do something like this when he's already entering the end of his career. What team is going to throw him a long-term deal worth really anything substantial? So yeah, we'll see what ends up happening with this situation. I really don't think he gets dealt before training camp, and Harden's going to have to decide, do I burn all my bridges and just go in there and destroy everything, or do I try and play out this contract and just try and make the situation work until a trade does come along? Let me know what you think happens in the comment section below. I appreciate y'all watching as always. Leave a like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. If there's any other things that you want me to talk about with the offseason being, again, kind of dead at this point, comment down below. I'm going to be doing more team breakdowns like I have a couple of times. I'm going to have a Mavericks one coming up here pretty soon, as well as some other squads. So let me know some teams, players, historic things that you want to see me break down here on the channel until training camps and stuff roll around. We're about to get the NBA schedule. I'll probably make a full video breaking that down as well. And yeah, I appreciate y'all watching. I'll see y'all later. Everyone say it back.